Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Take your seats and open up your minds. Today, we're going to be covering the Mothman. I am your host, Alex, and today we have a special guest on, Effin. He is the subject matter expert, as I would say, in the Mothman topic, the cryptid, the mystery. Effin, thank you for coming on.
Glad to be here. Hello.
And I know I called you the expert and everything like that. I call you the expert because I'm not going to lie, I'm not too knowledgeable on the Mothman. That's why I asked you to please come onto the show and tell us a little bit more about it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first?
So the way I got introduced into cryptozoology, for the most part, I was looking at, say, Bigfoot, and I'd be like, I don't know if it's real or not. I don't make a decision yet. But then I found a certain YouTube channel, Bob Gimlin, and it really got me into cryptozoology. And I started doing my own research and all that. And I like to do it in a really scientific manner too. And I thought these are a lot of good ideas. I'd love to share them with everyone. So eventually that got me to make the ASP Foundation, which is a parody of the SCP Foundation because they're also fairly scientific.
Yep.
Yep. So we look at a wide range of stuff. We'll go as far as theology if we need to. But for right now, the main focus is cryptids. And so eventually, I got to Mothman, and it took me a while to actually start researching Mothman because that's another one where I was like on and off about it. There's a lot of spiritual connotation behind it and all that. But eventually I did get to it, and it was very interesting.
So what kind of drove you to the Mothman? Now, you said Bigfoot. I love Bigfoot. That's like one of my favorite cryptids. I like to believe that Bigfoot is real. I'm not a skeptic. I do think he's out there. And I'm almost kind of like you. That's kind of what drew me into maybe some of these other cryptids. Now, again, I'm not any expert, but whenever there's a Bigfoot story, I love hearing it. But for you, it was almost like that's kind of the stepping stone that brought you into the world of cryptids. Was that Bigfoot, and then you found the Mothman.
Yes, I'd say I looked at a lot of cryptids before I actually got to Mothman. But there's a few that I kind of like dismissed before getting there. So I know Bigfoot was obviously first. I spent most of my time on that. But eventually I did get to cave crawlers. And that's a big one. People don't know much about it, but there's a lot of if you look out into the world, there's a lot of ways that it's been still put out into the world. Like, have you ever heard of the rake? If you ever heard of flesh gates, if you ever heard of it's within our own mind, I'd say survival instinct has been built up to such a point that it's our main way of driving fear. So we'd make things like SCP-96, we'd make Golem from Lord of the Rings. That's essentially what it looks like, and it's pretty scary. But so I covered that. I'd cover the Megalodon, and I was like, so stuff like the Megalodon and Jackalope. I'm pretty sure I was found explanations for why people think they exist and if they do exist or whatever. I've done a lot of research on all the three I just named, but for the Mothman, there was just this, when I made my video on it, it took a lot of research. So it started off with me hearing these people talk about Point Pleasant having the Mothman, and just the design of it really drew me in. The big glowing red eyes, the giant wings, and it's this black creature that can fly, and it's man-shaped. It was just very interesting aesthetically, and a lot of the stories were kind of interesting to me. So that kind of definitely drew me in. So it was one of my favorite cryptids, even though for the longest time I didn't really believe in it. I was kind of like half and half on if it would be real or not. But then when I started to cover it, I looked into it some more, and I found various ways where it could be real, more scientific approach to it. Not that I dismiss anything that's of a spiritual nature, but it's less easy to prove and it's less likely a lot of the time. And a lot of people were essentially associating it with bridge demon from another dimension, or the pagan worshippers or whatever caused it to exist. And that kind of put me off the topic because I was like, okay, well, there's not much merit in that personally. But then I started to see a lot of other people make reports of Mothman, even outside Point Pleasant. I was like, this might be something worth looking into. And then I found maybe almost 1,000 reports on Mothman on various places. And that's about when I started my research and did everything.
Okay. So when did the Mothman first appear? What year?
It's hard to say a pin on it because there are some people who said it's always been there. There are some people who associate it with the indigenous thunderbirds, I think is the name. And they say that's Mothman. There are people who said in the 1800s there was this rock that they called the Devil's Teacup, I believe, and they essentially said, "Oh, you went there and saw Satan, and it sucked my soul out," and people thought that was Mothman. But I think the common reports where like it really started up was 1950 is the oldest one I could find of the modern way we see Mothman, and the 1960s was when it all kind of like kicked off in Point Pleasant.
Yeah, it's weird that you say that too, that like it was even before the 1950s that it was said to be around, because from what my knowledge was, it was like that's the start date of this thing. And that's why it was one of those questions that I asked you, is that to me that's what it was. So I was wondering if, yeah, again, if you knew of anything else prior to that. And it seems like it, like what you were saying, it's always been around to some people, or like, that's the belief um is right there. So that's really interesting that I didn't know that this thing was around even before the 1950s. Now, it started in the 50s, but I feel like this is one of those things where it just kind of died off. It was only around for or the hype of it was only around for a couple of years, correct?
That's what most people think, that it was in Point Pleasant in the 60s and then that was it. But I've gotten a lot of reports and I found out there's been a recent rash of sightings from 2011 to even like recently 2020, 2021, 2022. There's been this big thing in Chicago, O'Hare National Airport specifically, where a lot of people are seeing the Mothman. And I found reports around the states around Lake Michigan, and I even found one as far as Colorado. So it's kind of like everywhere and people don't realize that. I didn't realize that until I saw the Chicago reports, and it's like I think even to this day it's still um getting reports from Chicago.
That's really interesting, because that I didn't know that either. I thought this was one of the I thought this was one of those things where it was only around for a couple of years and then it's totally disappeared. I did not know that even today there was even sightings. But this is more of like a North American type of cryptid. It's not really found anywhere else in the world, correct? Or are there other reports of this creature or this cryptid in other countries?
As far as I can tell, it is just centered in this like smallish area in North America. Because with Bigfoot, you have all the variants: Yeti, Alma, Siawi, Yeren. With again cave crawlers, which I talked about, there in like Russia and Australia, I think, as well as North America. But
Mhm.
with Mothman, it seems to be just centered around Lake Michigan and Point Pleasant, and again, the furthest one I could find was Colorado. So it's just kind of that little bubble, but that's just my research because I looked through these 600 reports I found, but there could be more out there that I'm just missing because I kind of, after the 600 or whatever it was, I kind of just started to give up and I'm like, all right, that's enough looking into this. But it could be other places, but as far as I've found, it seems to be just centered in this spot around North America, Lake Michigan, that sort of area.
Well, so you bring up the Bigfoot and the Yeti and like how there's different variants of that. Now, is it entirely possible that there could be different variants of the Mothman and its appearance? Like it doesn't, because now I'll just ask you this question too. Like, what exactly does the Mothman look like? Because again, like what I was saying, could it not be that there's different variants, different like colors and shapes? Because the Yeti, the Bigfoot, they look different. They're how they stand, everything is a little bit different. So maybe there are other reports in countries of the Mothman. It's just that's not what they call it. Now I'm not 100% sure on like every single cryptid. So I don't know if there's another cryptid that is like the Mothman that it could be a mistaken for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, cryptids get confused all the time. People will see the Wendigo, and that could be related to the rake. And there's just a bunch of different names, and they can look very different. I'm not sure about in other countries, but that's very much possible. But I know at least in North America, the one that I've been looking at, it has had multiple descriptions, kind of, because the coloring of the Mothman itself can be black, but it can also be gray. It can be brown. That's kind of the range: black, gray, brown.
Hmm.
And with the eyes, I remember seeing that. So it mainly has red eyes, right? The glowing red eyes, but it's been described to have yellow eyes, orange eyes, and I've even like seen a few reports saying green eyes, which is so there are some variations just in the reports themselves. But I think the main sort of description would be red eyes, a black coloration, membraneous wings, that sort of thing. The one thing that I haven't completely pinned down is, does it have like an extra pair of arms on top of the wings or not? But I'm assuming it doesn't, just because that makes more sense for a creature.
Interesting. Okay. Now so you're saying that it might have a set of arms, or it may not have a set of arms because of the wings.
Yes, so I essentially, what I concluded was it was a lot like a bat. It had an evolutionary line, and it was similar to the bat, and that's kind of what I was assuming.
Hmm.
Um, and so there are artist depictions of it having arms, like half of the drawings have arms, and a lot of reports say angel-like, and there's some that say man-like, right? And it's just the statue, I remember, in Point Pleasant also has arms, and they interviewed some people to figure out that. But they also said they took reference from a bodybuilder, so maybe that's where they got the arms from for the statue.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
there's no actual, like, I looked very hard. There's not one report that mentions arms. They just say angel like, man like. There's not one report that says arms. So it's I'm just gonna say it doesn't have arms, just because that makes more sense atomically for a creature.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, because I'm gonna ask you in just a second, but like, it's weird to think that it. What exactly is the Mothman? Like, is it a man? Is it like an alien creature? Is it like an evolutionary like thing? Is it like a government abomination? So, I guess my next question for you is, what is your theory behind the Mothman? How did it come to be? And I guess, yeah, let's just start with that one. How do you think the Mothman came to be, or what do you think the Mothman actually is?
Well, the way I was introduced to Mothman, the original kind of consensus was, oh, it's an omen or it's a demon, and it's come to warn us about all the bridge collapses that surround the Mothman. There was in Point Pleasant and I think Chicago, there was two bridge collapses after the Mothman was there. So they're like, it's an omen warning us, or it's causing the collapses, and it's essentially a demon or a deity or something coming in. And again, that's kind of like what put me off originally from it. And again, there's been a few reports that associated it with religious connotations. There was some Christian in a trailer that said it was pagan worshippers. That was like one report, but most of them mainly just describe it. So I think that some people just put a religious connotation on it, and there's not much evidence besides the bridge collapses that just kind of happened twice when the Mothman was there. So personally, if we see this as a flesh and blood creature, which again is what I normally default to, just because it's the most provable, it's the most plausible the majority of the time. Not that spiritual creatures don't exist, but I'm saying just for this one, it seems likely that it could be just a flesh and blood creature. And so my idea was there was some mammal in North America. I don't know which mammal, that's still difficult to find, but it was a mammal, and it evolved to have these wings, like of evolution similar to a bat, where it just evolved these membraneous wings from what used to be hands or whatever it was, and that sort of thing. A lot of people think it could be a bird, but I kind of ruled that out just because it has like, I forget what specific characteristics, but I remember like it doesn't have a beak, it has fur, it's got membraneous wings, it's tall, all that sort of thing. I was like, so this is sort of a mammal, and you can see a lot of animalistic characteristics in it. So my theory again is just that some mammal evolved a lot of bat-like features, and that's about it. And even the red glowing eyes, people say that's very unlikely. It happens a lot in nature where things have reflective eyes. A lot of people call them glowing, but I haven't seen a single report actually say glowing. They said when I shine the light on it, it looked like it was glowing, but a lot of people said it was reflective. It was like red reflectors. So it doesn't actually really have glowing eyes. It just has like bright red that reflects light quite often. So it does seem plausible that it would just be a mammal evolving bat-like features.
Well, so yeah, the way that you're describing it to me, because my first like when I think of the Mothman, I think of like it has like feathery wings. Has like the head of like an owl, or like it's kind of shaped like that, or at least like most pictures, like you know, kind of depict that a little bit. But what you're saying is it's almost more bat-like in the sense where like the wings are like skin. I guess not like
Yeah.
skin, but like
They call it membrane wings.
yeah,
Um, yeah, a lot of the features are kind of like what drew me to think it's not owl-like, because a lot of people say, I remember super bald head. It has the eyes. I haven't seen many other features of the head. I know it has talons or hooves on its feet or something like that. People have mentioned that before, but it also has like primate-shaped feet, which is a weird combination. And I membranous wings, which is again just that like skinny sort of feel. And the way that evolution worked with bats is like the what used to be hands, I think, like kind of what our hand bones look like, got extended and had the skin in between connect, and that's kind of like what the wings are made of, in layman's terms.
yeah.
And so a lot of people describe the same thing of those wings, and it's black and it's 6 to 10 feet tall and all that, and it has all these features, and that's kind of the conclusion I came to with all those features.
Well, all right. My question is how the hell did it get the name the Mothman if all of these, or not me, okay, maybe not all, but like most of the reports are like nothing of like a moth. Because like when I think of a moth, like I don't know, it doesn't look anything like what you're describing. So like, who came up with the name Mothman and why? Like that doesn't make any sense because he doesn't have antennas. Do moths have
Uh,
antennas? Moths have
I
antennas, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So like why the Mothman? Why not like I don't know, the Demon Man or like the I don't know, Vampire Man or like, Bat no, I guess not Batman, but
Batman.
but it just to me the name Mothman, it doesn't make sense to me after all the reports that you're saying are describing it in a way that does not even resemble a moth because moths are tan too.
Yeah.
So, in all the description of it are like it's dark. What you were saying, like gray, black, brown. So, and the thing that you're saying about the eyes too, how it's when you're saying when like light reflects off of them, it has that red hue to it, I guess.
Yes.
So,
It's if you ever seen red reflectors on like a bike or whatever, that's kind of what it looks like.
So it's almost like cat eyes because I have two cats and like in like when it's dark out or whatever, but like I shine my like cell phone light or whatever in the dark, their eyes will glow. So is it almost maybe something like that the Mothman has for eyes?
I'm not entirely sure because I looked into the cat thing and it's a very specific sort of thing, but it wouldn't be like something I'd rule out either.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of 50-50 on the cat eyes idea. And as for the name Mothman, I did find the original newspaper that gave it that name from Point Pleasant.
So
It
it was Point Pleasant's fault for naming it the
it is,
Mothman.
yes. There was a lot of names being thrown around, and that's just the one that stuck.
Ooh,
It
what
was
what
I
other
remember
names did it
the
have?
um, I don't know. There might have been like Demon Man and stuff.
Oh,
I don't entirely remember, but they had the monster Mothman, and I remember Moth and Man had a space in between, and so there was like a few details that were different from what the name is now. So it just kind of evolved over time. So it's like, oh, it's a monster, it's a man, it's a moth. They were just throwing names in there because, I mean, I don't know. All insects have membranous wings, right? Like what I was just describing with the bats. That's technically what insects have too. They have their wings are made of membranous material,
mhm.
and some people would argue the moth was agrees with the four arms theory, like the wings and the arms, and that's why they called it a Mothman. But I'm not entirely sure on that because it's just kind of, I guess, the beady eyes and the wings and all that. People gave it a bunch of different names, and Moth was one of them. And for some reason, that's what stuck because it was the newspaper giving these names, right? They didn't know as much as the people who had the sightings. They just got the basic newspapers that, or the conversations they had with a friend. There might have been some game of telephone going on that ended up making it seem like it's a moth.
Well, that's bad journalism right there. That's, you got to talk to people. You have to talk to the people that actually encountered it. So you're not making stupid names like this.
Yeah,
I'm
I remember.
sorry.
I'm pretty sure the original newspaper wasn't covering a report. It was
No.
just talking about how there was a string of sightings.
Okay. Well, here's my next question then. So you're saying that it possibly was a mammal that evolved, right?
Yeah.
So what are so what's the deal with all the sightings then of the owl that looks strangely familiar? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think there was something like harpy owl, harpy eagle. I don't remember what it was. There was some like barn owls, whatever. Um, that's not a theory that I think has much credence. I've looked into it before, and the idea that, because there was like firefighters, police officers, hunters, if they can't tell the difference between a 3 foot tall owl and a 7 tall foot black red-eyed creature, I'm sorry, then you need to find another job as a police officer that's meant to stay alert, as a firefighter that's meant to stay alert, as a hunter, right? As a trapper, as I don't know. There was a bunch of different professions I found. If you need to find another job if you can't tell the difference.
Well, and here's my thing too. And like and when we talk about cryptids, when we talk about like anything in like the mystery realms of like the world and everything like that, it is so hard to discredit people that have been doing stuff like we were saying, hunters, people that have been in like that area for years and years and years, and then they see something that they've never seen before, and like they know it, they know every single animal, and then it's like, no, I saw this 7 foot tall creature that had wings and it looked like a man. And like, I don't know what it was. It's like, are you going to tell me you're going to sit there and you're going to criticize this person for seeing something that they know that they saw? And like, that's why I'm passionate about this, is because like, I, I, I want to believe that what people are saying, they really did see. Now, I will say though, there are people out there that just make stuff up, like
Yeah,
fabricate stuff, just like, just
but
because
it's
they want
still like
attention.
pretty, it would be pretty crazy if that were true, because if we look at Bigfoot, for example, on the BFRO website, there's over 70,000 reports there alone. And if you're trying to tell me that there's some cult going out in the woods dressing up with these perfect costumes, putting perfect scarring on their feet, throwing 20-pound rocks like baseballs,
Hmm.
and they've done this since 20,000 years ago, because there's the legend of the Sabe from the indigenous population. And so they go back 20,000 years. There's 70,000 of them roaming the woods doing all this stuff. And you're telling me this delusional conspiracy theory is more likely than there's an ape in North America? Then I'm sorry, that's just Occam's razor.
And that's the thing too, is like there's just I believe that like things can change, like like when, for instance, and we'll just take like basketball for instance, and someone makes like a really weird shot or something like that, and you wouldn't think that would be possible, but you see it happen, and no one's done it before. Well, the same thing could be plausible for like all these cryptids and like all this weird stuff that's happening. Just because you haven't seen it yet doesn't mean that it's not possible.
Yeah.
And you had talked about how many encounters there were with Bigfoot. How many encounters did the Mothman have with people? I guess in like, so that string in like the 1950. What was the years again? It was 19.
1960 was Point Pleasant, and more recently, like 2011 to 2020, the 2020s for Chicago.
So I
Oh,
guess in the 1960s, do you know how many people, or how many people in that town actually had the encounter with the Mothman?
So I looked at the list of reports and newspaper sightings, and a lot of it was repeats. So it was kind of difficult to get a understanding of it, but I'm pretty sure it was something 20 to 100, something like that. I know that's a broad range, but so it
That's
was
like that's like saying I like Skittles and I like lobster.
yeah, but it might have been like 50, 20, 100, something like that.
No,
But I
yeah.
know in total, again, there was like 700 reports.
Oh, wow.
And if you think about it, like a lot of people are gonna think like, who am I gonna tell about this? I'm not gonna say anything. And I hear a lot of reports where they're like, I've never told anyone this, or this was my mom's report, or whatever. So the chances are that like 1 in 100 actually report it. 1 in 2 if you want to like be conservative about it. But
Mhm.
that means like there's probably thousands of Mothman reports out there that no one's reported as well. So it's probably fairly common.
I think that happens a lot with a lot of this stuff, and you see it all the time on like the TV shows, with like even like ghosts and everything like that, where it's just like they don't know where to go, they don't know who to talk to, and
Yeah.
then just like finally one day like they reach out to somebody and tell. So I would agree with you like that. I think that's okay to say like 20 to 100 because there might be people who are just like I don't want to be labeled as crazy. I don't want the people asking me questions about this, like so there
Yeah,
are those.
and I know there were some people, sorry to cut you off, but there
No, no,
was people
sorry.
from O'Hare National Airport. There was this one sighting from they were loading a truck, I think, and there was like 10 people who did the same sighting of Mothman behind a fence. It was 7 feet tall. It flew straight up in the air, and like 10 different people reported that. And one of them essentially said they were explicitly told not to report it. And I'm pretty sure there's a few people out there that were saying like there's no benefit that's going to come from me reporting this, but I'm going to do it anyways because it's been driving me crazy.
Mhm.
So there's that too.
So speaking of that, where they were being told not to say anything, um, something that I saw recently, like I'm big into the unsolved mystery TV show, like the one from the '90s, like that. I don't know the guy's name, the host, but he's so fucking creepy, and like he does such a good job at like that show. I could watch. I wish that like there was a million shows or episodes on that show, but there was an episode about the Mothman, and I remember him saying that the Men in Black came to that town and were showing up at people's houses and telling them not to say anything. So this is what happened at the airport? Is that the same thing? Were there Men in Black that came there and just were like, "Hey, just shut up, you didn't see anything."
Um, so yeah, even in like the reports with Men in Black, 99% of all involved usually don't know what's going on. And 99% of reports, there's not going to be the Men in Black. But in that one, I would assume that they knew something or didn't want something to get out. They might not even know what's going on, but they're just like it's bad for business, something like that. And I heard like another one, like it was pretty crazy one where it's like, oh, Mothman was meeting with an alien, and then these two people disappeared and now I'm being harassed. Like someone actually said after I saw Mothman, someone came and visited me while I was alone, and then my friend came back from the bathroom, and then they ran away. So it's definitely plausible that Men in Black sort of people are involved in the Mothman, but probably not in every report. Maybe in like 5, 10 of them that I've read.
What do you think? Do you think the Men in Black know something about the Mothman, or do you think the government, I guess, knows something about the Mothman and are trying to keep people quiet? Because that's my biggest thing is look, why? What is the purpose between making people shut up about this? Like, I don't understand. Like, why do we have to be
Oh,
quiet
yeah.
about it?
There's a lot of theories behind why they'd want to keep people quiet. Like with aliens, it might be they're reverse engineering the technology and don't want it to get out. One time they tried to hide pumas in North America, I think it was, because they think it would cause a panic, which is like a mild thing. So if imagine
Wait,
people knew Bigfoot existed,
wait. Like
um,
the cat, the puma?
the cat puma, yes, there
What?
was a government thing to try and disprove them. Yeah.
What?
Um,
No way.
I and I've been working with a Missy Sterling. She has a YouTube channel. She covered crawlers and portals and stuff. I don't know. She has 1,000 subscribers at this point, and she got contacted by someone from the Army Corps of Engineers, and I think that's a part of the government. And essentially, when they saw the image of the cave crawler, they flooded the area. There was this big flood. I forget what it was called, but there was an actual flood, and this flood was in the news. And they essentially said they caused it to try and kill the creature. And a lot of times they do that sort of thing. So they just want to like kill it. They don't want it to get out.
Wait. Hold on,
This
hold on, hold on,
this whole
hold
thing.
on. Hold on 1 second. So, wait, you're saying that someone from the military called this person and told them what they did? Like what the military?
They not only told them what they did, they gave them like certain facts that would kind of prove their point that are public knowledge. Stuff like, oh, why didn't they slowly flood the area? Instead, they like because I think it's public knowledge that they could have like done something with the flood. It was a dam or something, and they kind of like just hit a whole flood in the area rather than slowly filling it up, which would have like saved lives or something. And they're
Mhm.
like, why wouldn't we do that it was if we were trying to do what the publicly stated purpose was, something like that. I don't entirely remember it, but they were essentially saying that the whole time. And so they're on my list of the men in black because I don't think it's just one organization. But yeah, they were talking about like how they work with the park rangers, and they're trying to keep people safe. Like, think about the park rangers specifically. They have a business to run. If people stop going to national parks because Dennis Martin goes missing in the 60s, then you know
Yeah.
it's going to be bad for business. A lot of I'm assuming it's businesses that like don't want they don't want to lose business. They're people who just don't want to cause panic. They're people who don't want the fact that they know to get out because knowledge is power. That sort of thing. There's a multitude of reasons, but I think in the case of Mothman, it's something like that.
I feel like, at least for me, if you were to say, this town, like, yep, the Mothman is real, there's sightings here, that would be someplace I would want to go to try to see it. I feel like it would have the opposite effect where it's like, no, like it's good for businesses, like, like
Yeah,
we're
and Point Pleasant has a festival every year, and it brings in $1 million every time they hold it, or something like that.
see, so like what why so that's my thing too, is like why if it's bringing in business, and that would be that's my fighting point right there. That's my example. If they can rake in $1 million and the Mothman isn't even around anymore, to like, it doesn't. The Mothman isn't like the groundhog where it comes out every year and is like, hey, but but like the UFO thing makes sense. Like I could understand, like, okay, United States or whatever government, they have a UFO, reverse engineer it. Now they're the ones with the superior technology, yada yada. Like that makes sense. But like the Mothman, like it's not like the Mothman's gonna fight for any government agency or anything like that. So I find that, or even like Bigfoot, for instance, like we keep bringing it back to Bigfoot, but like I just don't understand. Like I'm very confused. I hate it. I don't like it.
Yeah, there's again a multitude of reasons. It doesn't have to be the ones I mentioned.
Yeah.
I made a list somewhere, but I've kind of forgotten where it was. But but there's like a lot of different reasons for cover-ups of cryptids, and a lot of them are really shady. Sometimes involve money. I remember there's one theory. I don't believe in it, but if you look at the Patterson Gimlin film, which again one of the best proofs of Bigfoot out there. I haven't seen any, like, I made a video on it. No one's been able to dispute it. Anyways,
What's the video
the
called? What's the video called?
it, it's called the Patterson Gimlin Film: An Analysis of Behavior. Very wordy. Um,
Okay.
so I essentially just analyzed and I was like, oh, it's probably trying to make a diversionary display because it probably has a young child nearby and it's trying to get these hunters away from it. And this is like
Oh.
a reported thing in animals. So, anyways, I put a bunch of like reports, not reports, scientific articles analyzing the film. And there was, I think, 200 comments on the video, and not a single one was able to dispute them. I've been talking with people. I keep responding to them. No one's able to do it. And they eventually either give up or send so many emojis that I give up. Um, so, anyways, this video I made, I got in contact with someone else on Reddit, and they told me of the massacre theory. There's certain things that didn't work about it, but there was one part they mentioned that really worked for me. I don't know if anyone else has brought this up, but they said essentially the lumber industry wanted to build there, and if they knew Bigfoot, like Bigfoot's a threat, it might be nice, it might be bad, but it has killed people. And so they're like, we need to get rid of it. We need to do a massacre. And so they just killed all the Bigfoot in the area and didn't want anyone to know about it, because then they'd have to relocate, they'd have to make safety measures, and that's very costly. And so it could be something similar to that for the Mothman. Again, I don't really believe in that theory for the Patterson Gimlin film, but that was like the best part of it for me, and I think that can apply to other scenarios.
I think that's a pretty good point that you bring up, or whoever you were talking to, is that
Yeah.
um the fact that, like, other businesses, like you said, the logging industry, things like that, they want to be somewhere, but they don't want to, deal with, like, because what was it? It was I think it was an owl too that was like not endangered, but it what was it? It was like it was really big where this logging company wanted to be, but some people threw a fit about it. And I think like the logging industry in that area, like nearly like, like went under because of it, because like they couldn't work there anymore. So like, just killing off an entire species might be faster and easier because, then you get to keep, making business. But you think if something like that, like let's say it was the Mothman, Bigfoot, whatever, you think one of these people would have either taken a picture of it, because people are always doing that. Like, even if it
He
was like,
What the massacre theory essentially said the Patterson Gimlin film is. Yeah, and the Mothman's pretty fast and it doesn't like light, but I don't know. Sorry, I cut you off. Keep going.
no, 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 it's fine. But yeah, that's essentially what I was saying. Like, it just seems like there'd be some sort of evidence from the people that were killing them off, whether it be like, like someone keeps like a fingernail or like a hand or like, just like like one of the skulls. You think someone, and then like where did all the bodies go? That'd be another thing. It's like, okay, let's say they burned them. Well, the bones, bones take more than, just like a campfire to burn. So you think there would be all those remains too. And same thing like even with the Mothman, I'm sure there'd be some sort of remains too if they were getting rid of them. But
Yeah.
yeah.
There are a few cases where I've heard of remains of Bigfoot. So there was these Yeti fingers and scalp in the Himalayas, I believe. And they essentially knew that colonizers were going to come. And you know what colonizers do? They take all the stuff for themselves and put it in their museums and all that. And these were supposed to be relics. So they essentially replaced them with fakes. And if you look at the story of the Minnesota Iceman, someone shot and killed a Bigfoot, and they paraded it around in their tractor museum, and then they crossed the border and they came back with a fake and they said, yeah, it was too valuable. But honestly, I think like a man in black talked to them at the border, whatever. But they essentially went and said they hid it, and then they came back with fake. But beforehand, two scientists analyzed it, and they said, yeah, this is like a new species or whatever. And there are like hair samples that come back as nothing we've seen before, and people kind of just ignore it. And if you think of the fossil record, we have maybe less than 5% of the primate fossil record. There was a scientist that said that, I forget who. But it's very rare to actually find bones. We've a very limited understanding. People overestimate how much science currently knows and how well some of the systems work. Like it's doing well, but we have less than 5% of the fossil records. A lot of the bodies get covered up because of, again, who knows why. So yeah, there's a possibility that there have been bodies or other things have happened and this sort of thing occurred.
Well, especially if there's, I think, like very few of that species, whether it be, whatever we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and then they, like animals start eating them, whatever happens to them. And then like you're not going to find as many bones. You're not going to find as much evidence of these things. And the sightings of them are going to be very far and few in between. Like we're talking about with the Mothman, there's a lot of sightings in the 50s or in the 60s. And then it seems like it kind of drizzled down. And then now, like in the 2000s, a couple it's starting to kind of pick up just a little bit more. So like maybe, who knows, relocating, I don't know, but
Yeah. I think
uh,
like if you look at, say, Bigfoot, they could be intelligent enough to bury their bodies. If you
mhm.
think if cave crawlers, the one I was mentioning before, they live in caves, they might die down there. If you think of Mothman, they might migrate, they might do whatever, they might, who knows? There's a million different reasons we won't find a body. I don't want to just make up excuses, but it's how often do you go out in the woods and just see a body laying on the
It
ground, right? Things will eat it
exactly.
up. Things will eat it up.
And that's a big argument too, and I thought about that. Like, I grew up in, Minnesota, up north or whatever. There's plenty of times where me and my buddies were walking through the woods and we'd find, like a dead raccoon or like maybe like a deer, but that stuff is really like deer up north. Whew, there's like a million of them. So like, and the fact that like we didn't see them all the time, but like maybe, like once
Yeah,
a
you'll
year
see,
we,
like, roadkill, but you won't
yeah.
if there's a big body, they're gonna go for it.
Exactly, and the fact that, like,
Predators.
okay, the Mothman, Bigfoot, whatever we're talking about, they're very few. You're not gonna find all of that stuff, and again, creatures are gonna eat that stuff, take the bones other places, and then what you were saying, if they're intelligent enough to bury them, like, they're gonna be way underneath the ground. You're gonna have to actually dig for that stuff, and
Yeah.
it may take, 200 years from now if, like, one of those bones coming up, so, yeah.
And, like, with cryptids, a big feature of cryptids is usually that they will hide from humans, so if they die, it'll be away from all human interaction.
Mhm, exactly. Now, I don't know if you know this, but maybe you did some research on this or you found something when you were doing your research. What are some of the effects that the Mothman had when he had these encounters? So, like, as far as like the people that he encountered, like, okay, let's take UFOs and everything like that. Sometimes like people report like getting like motion sickness and like sunburn, like they have things like that. Now, with any of the encounters with the Mothman, was there anything like this that happened?
Yeah, there was mainly just, like, senses of fear that'll, like, paralyze in you, and I think there was one report that was, "Oh, I sense pure evil," but that's not I don't know if that's anything besides just feelings of seeing it. Because if you see, like, a tiger, you might feel the same thing, so I don't know if that's anything unique, but there were some effects like that, I know.
Okay. Okay,
Um,
interesting.
and yeah, there was one religious person actually who essentially said, "Oh, I got a demonic presence from that." But I don't know how you can quantify feeling a demonic presence, so I wouldn't. And that was one person, so I'm not entirely sure in that.
Well, I guess maybe because, like, again, the fact that like those bridges collapsed because people died from that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe it was like the sense of like maybe not demonic, but maybe like this creature, because like who knows, like the creature may have had something to do with the bridge collapse, and I'm not saying that it did or didn't, but like
Like I had the idea at some point that it just attacks bridges for some biological reason. It just has a habit of that.
just has a
Something about it.
grudge.
Yeah, it has a
Just-
grudge. So a bridge killed its family or something.
But yeah, I mean, it could be something like that where like the religious person or whatever, who encountered the Mothman, just like it had a sense of something like bad happening and they equated it to like, evil or a demon or something like that.
Yeah. People use their own subjective experiences and relate whatever they see in reality to that. So maybe there was some sense of fear or whatever, and they called it demonic. Maybe there is some reason for the bridge collapsing, like it sees the metal, it doesn't like metal, something like that. I don't know. I know it chases cars. Uh,
Yeah.
so, and it can go like 160 miles per hour chasing cars. And maybe it just has this thing against metal because it doesn't like lights either. So maybe it's attacking that. Who knows? But a lot of people will associate it with other things, and it's kind of like muddles the reports of it because we can't be entirely sure.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up because I totally had forgotten about that. Was another thing that in that episode from Unsolved Mysteries was that I think it was a group of teenagers were like out and about and then they saw it and then they just like they sped away, but they were going close to like 100 miles an hour down the road and it kept up with them. And that's just insane to think about that, like that a creature, because I don't think an owl, because again, like some people think it was like an owl or something like that. I don't think owls can fly. I mean, I'm no owl expert. Maybe they can. I don't know. If you're listening to this and you know a lot about owls, please leave in the comments if I'm an idiot and they do fly faster than that. But I don't think owls fly that fast.
Yeah, I think, like, eagles or whatever might be able to, but
Mm-hmm.
a common barn owl is a little slower as far as I didn't look this up before, so I don't know, this is just speculation, but I would assume something of that size or whatever wouldn't be that fast. And I think I saw that report you were talking about with the teenagers, and it reminds
Mm-hmm.
me of a commonality I actually see with the Mothman, kind of a fun fact. They aren't very good at walking. They're very clumsy and awkward, and they'll, like, keep their wings to the side and I guess waddle like a penguin. And I thought that I thought that was pretty funny to bring up.
That's funny because I think I can visualize what you're talking about because I think bald eagles are the same way. They
Yeah.
move from like right to left with their wings out. It's pretty funny. But no, I just looked it up. It looks like owls average about 40 miles per hour.
Yeah, so it's I would assume that this thing that's been reported chasing cars like 100 times wouldn't be just an owl that's super fast somehow.
No, no, that's crazy. Now, next question about the Mothman. Do you think the Mothman has anything against people?
Um, well, I know I've had a singular report talking about its diet where it grabbed a squirrel, so it might be like carnivorous or omnivorous. So it
Mhm.
might have those animal instincts of being just afraid of them or wanting to attack them because of predatory instincts. I don't think it has necessarily a vendetta of any sort.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of just like most other animals where it feels the same way as a lot of other animals or predators or whatever, where it wants to avoid us and it might see us as a meal, and that might be about it.
Yeah, because I mean, I think the same thing kind of goes with with sharks too. Like sharks don't intentionally like they're
Yeah,
carnivorous. They eat seals and everything like that, and they'll take a bite out of a human, but like they don't mean to like really eat. I guess us unless they're really hungry. But I guess yeah, because I haven't heard of any sort of reports of like the Mothman like biting someone's arm off or like anything
yeah.
like
No, it
that.
usually just runs at light when it sees light, and then it'll chase cars, I guess.
Hmm.
If you believe the Omen theory, where it's an omen helping to warn of the bridge collapse, then there's that. If you believe it's a demon that has a vendetta against bridges, then it's the opposite, I guess. Um, but that's kind of like not as easy to prove or understand. So I would say again, it's just kind of that basic level, similar to sharks.
All right. Well, I mean, we covered a lot of stuff now talking about Mothman. Is there anything that you feel like the audience or anyone listening should know, or if there's any particular story or any other information about the Mothman that's kind of relevant and kind of important to know?
Um, I can't really think of much. I guess in terms of cryptids, I'll usually try to think about how dangerous they are and any hints I would give. Um, with a lot of stuff like Bigfoot and cave crawlers, I just say lock your doors, lock your windows. With Mothman, it doesn't stick around long, and it hasn't really done anything to anyone. So I wouldn't really say anything in terms of that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I
I
think
don't think there's much I have to say about it.
okay. All right. Well, Ethan, thank you for coming on. I mean, we talked a lot about a lot of different stuff. How, it's not even a moth. It's a bat. We talked about
Yeah.
that. It's a Batman. That's what it is. It's not a
Batman.
Mothman.
This is Batman come to real life, yes.
Yeah. It was not just around in the '60s. That's something that I thought was the case that it was like only
Oh,
there.
yeah,
But
the minority of the reports were actually in the '60s, so
you know,
that's pretty
but
interesting.
But you shed some light that it was like there was reports dating before the '60s, and then now even today in the 2000s, we're looking at more reports coming up, which is great because you know what, I'd love to see the Mothman. If you want to go like celebrate the Mothman, I guess what was it? Point.
Point Pleasant has their festival,
Do you know the date on that?
I don't know, but I think you can look it up and they'll have their yearly festival. I think it's yearly. And I think right now, most of the reports, if you wanna if you wanna go looking for it, I'm not gonna take responsibility if you waste money doing this, but it would be in O'Hare National Airport, Chicago, I think has is where the epicenter has been.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll definitely have to do some digging around. Thank you for taking a listen. Ethan, thank you again for coming on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, keep your eyes out for more updates on our social media page for what's coming up next. And remember, we aren't looking for normal. We want stuff that's effing weird.
That's effing weird.
Why don't you have a speaker in every room in your home? Does it seem like a huge investment or a daunting task to set up yourself? At Dio, we finally made simple, affordable speakers that you can set up in every room in under a minute. No app or voice assistant needed. Just play from your iPhone to any speakers. It's that simple. Get our launch discount at dioconnect.com/blind knowledge.
Hi there, my name is Chris. I'm the host of the Cult Film Companion Podcast. We are the home of movies that are off, under, and ahead of the cinematic radar. I'm a firm believer that a cult movie can come from any time period, any director, any movie studio, and covers a wide variety of genres, often within one single movie. It's all about the legacy that these movies have built up over time. Please tune into the Cult Film Companion Podcast and remember to keep it cult, but don't drink the Kool-Aid, because it'll make you sick. Or kill you. Take care.